The Nazis on top of the tank are surrendering. One by one, they raise their hands and climb down from the armored vehicle that once gave them power. The battle for Paris is over. They have lost. The orders are clear: surrender and await capture. More soldiers emerge from behind sandbags, ruined walls, and street corners. Slowly, carefully, they step forward with empty hands held high. Some remove their helmets and place them on the ground beside their rifles. Others drop pistols and ammunition belts, creating a metallic echo as the weapons hit the pavement. The line of surrender grows longer. Men who once marched through these streets as conquerors now walk them again, but this time as prisoners. Their uniforms are still neat, their boots polished, but their faces are tired, drained, and silent. There are no speeches, no shouts, no resistance. Only the heavy sound of boots on cobblestones and the quiet rustle of defeat. Groups of soldiers form organized lines, waiting for instructions from the advancing Allied troops. Some glance nervously at the tanks and machine guns they left behind, while others stare blankly ahead, trying not to think about what comes next. The column of prisoners grows longer with each passing minute. Paris is no longer theirs, and now, stripped of their weapons and power, they must face the unknown future that awaits them as prisoners of war. While the German soldiers surrendered in one part of the city, a very different scene was unfolding elsewhere. In the streets of Paris, joy was spreading like wildfire. American troops and French resistance fighters moved side by side, securing the last pockets of the city and celebrating their hard-fought victory. Civilians poured into the streets, waving flags and shouting with emotion. Many ran toward the liberating soldiers, shaking their hands, hugging them, even offering flowers and kisses. The people of Paris wanted them to know how deeply they were loved and how much their sacrifice meant. Resistance fighters, once hidden in the shadows, now stood proudly in daylight, their armbands visible, their weapons raised in triumph. For 4 long years, Paris had suffered under occupation. Now, the city was free, and in every corner, cheers and music echoed as soldiers and citizens celebrated that freedom together. The captured German soldiers are now being gathered together. Under close watch, they're ordered to leave all of their belongings behind. One after another, they remove belts, helmets, knives, and ammunition pouches, dropping them onto the ground in neat piles. Rifles and pistols are stacked together, no longer in their control. The once powerful troops now stand silently in rows, stripped of everything that once made them soldiers. They're searched quickly, checked for hidden weapons, then guided into a large open area where hundreds of prisoners are already waiting. Some sit on the ground with their heads lowered. Others remain standing, staring blankly into the distance. Surrounded by Allied guards, they're no longer an army, just defeated men, waiting to be taken away. The war for them is over. The captured German soldiers were gathered in several key locations across Paris. Large open squares, wide boulevards, and areas near train stations were chosen to hold them. Places like the Esplanade des Invalides, the Place de la Concorde, and the rail yards on the city's outskirts became temporary holding zones. These open spaces allowed Allied troops and French resistance fighters to guard the prisoners effectively and prepare them for transport. As the hours passed, the number of captured soldiers grew rapidly. By the end of the day, more than 15,000 German troops had surrendered in and around Paris. They came from various units, infantry regiments, armored divisions, supply corps, and even remnants of the Luftwaffe ground forces. Some had been stationed in the city for years, while others had arrived only days before the surrender. Among them were men of every rank. Most were ordinary infantrymen, young and exhausted from days of fighting. But mixed in with the masses were non-commissioned officers and seasoned sergeants who had commanded small units during the occupation. There were also senior officers, including battalion leaders and staff officers responsible for the defense of the city. One of the most notable figures captured was General Dietrich von Choltitz, the German military governor of Paris. It was he who ultimately decided to disobey Hitler's orders to destroy the city and instead surrendered intact. His decision spared countless lives and save Paris from devastation. Now, these men, from the lowest private to the highest general, stood together as prisoners. Their power, authority, and weapons were gone. All that remained was defeat and the uncertain future that awaited them beyond the city they had once controlled. The city was finally free. After 4 long years under Nazi rule, Paris had taken back its liberty. But the real chaos was only beginning. The captured German soldiers now had to be marched through the very streets they once controlled, straight through crowds of furious citizens, on their way to an uncertain fate. The people had heard the news, and they rushed to gather along the streets where the prisoners would pass. The first groups of captured soldiers were the lucky ones. The crowds were still small, and the anger had not yet fully erupted. But with each passing minute, the number of people swelled. The sidewalks overflowed, windows and balconies filled with shouting voices, and the tension in the air grew heavier. The German soldiers were marched in long, tight columns down the main boulevards of Paris. Surrounded on all sides by Allied guards, they moved slowly, step by step, through the streets they had once patrolled with authority. Now, stripped of their weapons and uniforms marked with surrender, they were powerless. The crowds pressed closer as the procession continued. People shouted insults, cursed, and spat toward the columns. Some threw small objects, stones, rotten fruit, even scraps of paper, anything to show their hatred for the occupiers. The soldiers kept their eyes fixed ahead, trying not to react, their expressions blank and distant. Every turn they took, every street they crossed, felt like a public reckoning. These were no longer feared conquerors. They were defeated men, forced to walk a long path of humiliation before the very people they had once oppressed. And as the sun set over a free Paris, the endless line of prisoners kept moving forward, swallowed by a sea of anger, relief, and justice. What would happen to these captured Nazis now? Most of them would be taken to temporary holding camps on the outskirts of Paris, where they would be interrogated, registered, and separated by rank. Some high-ranking officers would face immediate questioning about their orders and actions during the occupation. Others, ordinary soldiers, would be transported by train to larger prisoner-of-war camps deep inside France, and eventually to facilities in Britain or the United States. Their future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would never again set foot in Paris as conquerors. While they were being led away, the city they once controlled was celebrating like never before. French resistance fighters marched proudly through the streets, welcomed as heroes. American soldiers were embraced and thanked by crowds who showered them with flowers and cheers. Flags waved, bells rang, and the people of Paris rejoiced in their long-awaited freedom. After 4 long years, the City of Light was free, and its oppressors were gone forever.